I hope you're doing well and welcome to the Horn Broadcasting Channel. My name is Mtalam Kosia. A major political and public health debate is unfolding across Kenya and the wider African continent after reports emerge that the United States government is planning to establish a medical quarantine and treatment facility in Kenya for Americans exposed to Ebola during the ongoing outbreak in the Republic of Congo. The decision, reportedly supported by the Trump administration and involving U.S. defense and health agencies, has generated outrage, fear, and deep political questions inside Kenya. According to international media reports, the United States wants Americans who contract or are exposed to Ebola in Central Africa to be treated or quarantined in Kenya instead of being flown back to America. The proposed facility is expected to include high-level biocontainment units and could initially host dozens of patients before later expanding into a large operation. But this announcement has immediately raised difficult questions across Kenya. Why Kenya? Why not America itself? And why do Africans feel that Western powers continue to use African countries when it suits their strategic interests? These are the questions dominating public discussion today. For many Kenyans, the anger is not simply about Ebola itself. The anger is symbolic. It touches on issues of sovereignty, dignity, unequal partnerships, and historical exploitation between Africa and powerful Western nations. Many citizens believe the decision reflects a double standard on how African countries are treated by global powers. Critics argue that if the United States possesses some of the world's most advanced medical infrastructure, then Americans exposed to Ebola should logically be treated inside the USA, where the country already has sophisticated infectious disease containment systems. During previous Ebola outbreaks between 2014 and 2015, infected American aid workers were flown back to the United States and treated in specialized medical centers. This time, however, Washington appears to be determined bringing Ebola-related cases onto American soil. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reportedly stated that the United States cannot allow and will not allow Ebola cases into the country. That statement has deeply offended many Africans, especially many Kenyans. Critics say that the message sounds as if African soil is somehow acceptable to dangerous medical risk, while American soil must remain protected at all costs. To many observers, it reinforces a painful perception that Africa is still viewed as a buffer zone for Western interests. This is where the political anger becomes larger than the medical issue itself. Across Africa, there has long been frustration about what many see as an equal global relationship. Western countries frequently describe African states as strategic partners, yet critics argue that the relationship often becomes transactional and one-sided. African countries provide military cooperation, natural resources, geopolitical support, and strategic territory, but when major global crises occur, the benefits rarely flow equally back to African populations. Many Africans are now asking, if America considered Kenya as a trusted ally, why not strengthen Kenya's own public healthcare system first before using Kenyan territory for foreign emergency operation? Why are billions spent on military cooperation and counterterrorism partnerships while Kenya's hospitals still struggle with shortages of equipment, medicine, and staffing? Those questions are becoming central to the public debate. The controversy also reflects growing African frustration over sovereignty and decision-making. Many citizens feel major decisions involving African countries are often negotiated quietly between political elites and foreign governments without meaningful public consultation. Reports indicate that discussions between Washington and Nairobi were still ongoing and that full Kenyan approval had not yet been finalized when the story broke publicly. That has created even more suspicions among Kenyans. People are now asking, was the public informed? Was the parliament consulted? Were public experts involved? Was there a national risk assessment? For critics of the Kenyan government, the issue reflects a larger pattern in Kenyan foreign policy, what they describe as excessive dependence on Western approval and Western interest. Some political analysts argue that Kenya's leadership increasingly positions the country as a regional strategic hub for Western geopolitical operations. Kenya already hosts extensive security cooperation with the United States and other Western countries in the counterterrorism, military training, intelligence sharing, and regional diplomacy. Now, critics fear that health security may be entering that same space. The Kenyan government also faces criticism over communication failures. Instead of immediately providing transparency, reassurance, and detailed explanation to the public, officials initially appeared cautious and vague. In moments involving public health affairs, uncertainty often creates panic. And Ebola is not an ordinary disease. It carries enormous psychological fear because of its high fatality rate and historical memory across Africa. The current Ebola outbreak in the eastern Congo is already being described as one of the largest and most dangerous outbreaks in the recent years. Health agencies say the Budimbugyo strain involved in the outbreak has no approved vaccine and no established treatment. The outbreak has already caused hundreds of deaths and spread into neighboring Uganda. International health officials warn that insecurity, weak infrastructure, and delayed responses are making the containment extremely difficult. Because Kenya is a major transport and aviation hub in East Africa, many citizens fear that introducing a foreign Ebola quarantine center could increase psychological and economic risk for the country, especially in tourism, trade, and regional perception. Even if the actual medical risk remains controlled, perception itself matters. Tourism investors, airlines, businesses, and international travelers often react emotionally to disease-related headlines. Some Kenyans fear that the country could unfairly become associated globally with Ebola, despite not being the origin of the outbreak. Another reason this issue has become politically explosive is because it touches on historical memory. Africa has a long history of being used by foreign powers during colonialism and during Cold War geopolitics. Many Africans therefore interpret modern international arrangements through that historical lens. When powerful countries appear to shift dangerous or controversial activities onto African soil, suspicion immediately emerges. To many critics, this Ebola facility debate represents a continuation of a larger global imbalance. Powerful countries protect themselves first, while weaker allies absorb strategic burdens. However, supporters of the proposed plan argue that there is another side to this story. Some health experts say Kenya actually possesses one of the strongest medical and logistical systems in East Africa. Nairobi serves as a regional humanitarian coordination center for the United Nations, WHO, and international emergency operations. Kenya also has better transport infrastructure compared to conflict-affected regions in Congo. Supporters argue that rapid treatment closer to the outbreak zone could reduce evacuation delays and improve containment efficiency. Others say that Kenya could potentially benefit through medical investment, technology transfer, training, and improved emergency preparedness infrastructure. But even those arguments have not fully calmed public anger. The core issue remains trust. Many citizens simply do not trust the African interests will be prioritized equally in such agreements. This is where the Kenyan government may be getting it wrong. First, there appears to be a failure of transparency. Second, there appears to be inadequate public consultation. Fourth, officials have not clearly communicated that Kenya gains strategically in return for accepting such a sensitive arrangement. And finally, the government may be underestimating the emotional and symbolic dimension of the issue. This is no longer just a health discussion. It has become a debate about national dignity, sovereignty, African identity, and unequal global power structures. The United States also faces criticism internationally because the move appears inconsistent with its own historical response to Ebola. Critics argue that if America once trusted its own healthcare systems enough to receive affected citizens directly, then refusing to do so now suggests political fear of domestic backlash rather than a purely medical decision. As this controversy continues, one major reality is becoming increasingly clear. African countries are becoming more vocal and more sensitive about how global partnerships operate. Across the continent, populations are demanding relationship based not only on security cooperations and diplomacy, but also on respect, equality, transparency, and mutual benefit. For Kenya, this moment may become a defining political test. If you've got any contribution or comment concerning this topic, please do so in the comment section. My name is Mtalam Kosia and this is the Horn Broadcasting Channel.